Hello. I hope that everything is okay with video, and I'm sure that microphone is working too. The picture is too small so far. Oh, hello. Let's start our English lesson on Socionics and Psychosophy first of all. I have prepared some information for you, visual information to show some important moments concerning Psychosophy. I'm gonna make my image a bit larger. Where is it? Here it is. But later I will shrink it back because I'll need to show you something. Everything is okay. I hope that there will be not only people who are watching us all the time in Russian. I hope that there are people from abroad that do not speak Russian and would like to listen something new about Socionics, Psychosophy in English. Anyway, the record of the stream will remain on the channel and you can watch it later. So I would like to greet anyone who will be watching this video later. I'll wait a bit. Creepy windmills, creepy lamp. Yes, everything is okay. It is moon over there, small moon. We also have lava lamp. It can be, it's not visible. Okay. So please write in the chat, where are you from? I see Yanis, he's from Latvia, as far as I remember. And please write where are you from, city, country, to see the geography of our audience. Our main participant, the main hero of our streams is here. Rusland. That's very strange. Rusland. Where are you from? Okay, Rusland. Ukraine. Kiev. Ukraine dominates so far in our chat. Israel. That's fine. Super. I deliberately made this stream later in the evening in order to make more convenient time for people who are from Europe and United States. Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan. God-forgotten place somewhere near China. Yeah, that's far, and it seems to me that it's quite late in Kyrgyzstan near China, because we have plus several hours over there. We have 19 hours and 6 minutes in Kaliningrad. So let us start. What general questions concerning Psychosophy do you have? Because I have prepared some information. We shall go through this info. Everything is okay? Yes. A week ago we had some problems. There were some problems with YouTube translation streams. So I'm a bit nervous. But it seems to me like everything is okay. Where is my document? Oh, here it is. I have to become smaller in order to show you everything I want. So what do we have? I have noticed that there is a very scarce information about psychosophy in Western sources. There are many people that are interested in socionics but have very little knowledge in psychosophy. So today's stream will help those people to tell apart these typologies. They seem very similar at first glance, but it's not correct. If you dig into these both theories, you will know that they are very, very different in their structure, in their nature. So I have to make, yes, something like this. So there is a small table. There is a small table, and you should see it well now, I think. It is a comparative table that shows, I think, the main feature about socionics and psychosophy, the first steps in understanding these typologies. So what do we have here? We have different quantity of types. We have 16 types in socionics and 24 types in psychosophy. These typologies are describing various layers, different layers of our psyche, because socionics shows and studies mostly information processing. When we type, for example, a person in socionics, we are analyzing the information that he's talking about. And according to this info, we make our conclusions about his strong or weak functions, aspects, quadras, etc. While psychosophy, roughly speaking, is describing behavior and down-to-earth and everyday priorities of a person. It is quite different layers of psyche, while both socionics and psychosophy tell a certain part, and they can describe a certain part, significant part of any personality. And what is common in socionics and psychosophy? They are describing and they are talking about, they are describing inborn types. These types are inborn and they do not change during the lifetime. So when we are many people ask, does socionic type change or does psychosophic type change? We always tell no, because both of these types seems to be inborn and then do not change during lifetime. These types are quite obvious when we look at small children, for example. When a child is born and when it starts walking and talking, we already hear the semantics of socionic types, and we see some behavioral patterns that are connected with psychosophic type. So from early childhood we can identify socionic and psychosophic type if we have a correct working methodology. So we have such experience in observations of small children, for example, when they are observed in early childhood and later when they go to school, when they become teenagers and so on. So socionic and psychosophic types do not change. We have observations of 10 and 12 and 10 and 20 years about our acquaintances, about some people that we know for many years, and their types have not changed as well. The same is with famous people. We constantly type famous people on socionics and psychosophy, and they demonstrate the same thing. Their types do not change over the time, but there can be some changes in third function of psychosophy, because every psychosophic type has a vulnerable third function, and every person has a so-called task during the lifetime to develop this function. And for example, we can have two persons with the same psychosophic types, and one of them will be more advanced in his work on third function. We later talk about this. And the first one can be quite the same as he was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So the third function shall be developed during lifetime. And that is the difference between different people with the same psychosophic types. And the time of appearance. First, Socionics appeared in 1970s, while psychosophy appeared a bit later, in 1990s. And there is a huge difference between these typologies in the fact that we have different quantity of people that worked on this theory, because Socionics was created by a huge collective of people who were interested in Socionics, who took part in Socionic conferences, and that is why we have nowadays a huge number of Socionic directions. We have many versions of Socionics and so on. While psychosophy was created by one single person, Alexander Afanasyev. He created this theory, and in his time, it was 1980s, he got acquainted with Socionics, and he was not pleased with that typology, so he decided to create his own typology as an alternative to Socionics. But it turned out that psychosophy has not become an alternative to Socionics. It just made us a different view from a different angle to human psyche. So that is why these two typologies, Socionics and psychosophy, they do not contradict each other in any way. They just, I think they complement each other. They are describing a person from different angles, and they have no any contradictions between them. But some people who do not have enough knowledge about Socionics or about psychosophy, they think that there is some kind of contradiction between Socionics and psychosophy. So let us see, what do we have more? It is a small scheme that I made to describe the main idea that we pursue when we type, for example, or when we study human psyche. It is a personality scheme. Here we have a small scheme that describes all the complex of all psychological features that any person has. And part of personality can be described by Socionic type. Other part of our
Canon extrovert with 4th emotion appear more socially introverted than an introvert with 1st emotion.
Inters, thank you for your donation. I will answer to your question shortly. So we have Socionic type and psychosophic type, and it is a typical part of any person, because any human being which is healthy, mentally healthy, has both Socionic type and psychosophic type. It is a typical part of any person. Each of us is one of 384. It's this number is can be calculated if we multiply 16 types in Socionics and 24 types in psychosophy. So we have 384 combinations, possible combinations. Later I will show you the table that we have. We are searching all the combinations that can be theoretically and practically exist in our society, and we have found only half of them so far. I will later show you our results in searching these combinations. So the question from Inters. An extrovert with 4th emotion. Yes, that's right. If we take, for example, such an characteristic of a person as sociability, emotion, emotionality and emotional expression. It is connected with emotion in psychosophy. So, for example, if we have an extroverted type according to Socionics, and this type has low emotion or weak emotion on the fourth position. So this extrovert can be perceived from a side as an introvert, and it often happens like that because it is not very emotional person when he is an extrovert, but he has low emotion. And for example, if we have an introvert with first emotion, you know, there is a very important thing that we have to say about emotion. The most emotionally expressive and the most sociable people, those who have second emotion, not first one. While if we take people with first emotion, it can additionally give more introverted vibe. So, for example, if we have extrovert with fourth emotion and introvert with first emotion, they are both may look as introverts, because all these characteristics give some kind of introversion. These people can be quite reserved, they can be quite calm in some daily situation. So if we take an introvert with first emotion, it does not give more extroversion. But if we take the same person with second emotion, he can be much more sociable, much more emotionally expressive, and this person with second emotion can appear much more extroverted. And it's not so important if we have an extrovert or introvert. Second emotion gives more extroversion in behavior. So-called psychological extroversion, the number of characteristics that we expect from an extrovert in ordinary psychology, because there is no equality between psychological understanding of extroversion and socionic extroversion. They are different quite. They are quite different. So let us go further. Here we have our scheme. So it is a typical part of any person, and each of us has unique individual part. It's our heredity, upbringing, personal experience, cultural differences, and so on. Everything that makes us different from other people, even if we, for example, meet a person which has the same socionic and psychosophic type, nevertheless, we are still, there's much different between these people because they have different individual part. So if we take, for example, Western typology Myers-Briggs, and read the descriptions of types, so we can have a very paradoxical situation. While MBTI, Myers-Briggs types, in their descriptions, they are trying to embrace all the three parts given in this scheme. They are trying to describe something from socionics, something from psychosophy, and something from individual unique part of a person. That is very ridiculous, because you cannot systematize all the differences that can exist between people, because we have very different way of life, we have different heredity, upbringing, and so on. So it cannot be systematized, it cannot be a basis of some kind of typology. So that's why it's very important to take a very correct part of a person to make a typology of this. It has to have some inner logic in this. So, for example, if we're typing socionic type, we have to listen to semantics. If we're typing psychosophic type, we have to hear the priorities that a person is speaking about. And every priority, we shall talk about it later, has to have some certain features, unique number of features that allow us to put this or that function as high, strong, or weak function, and so on. And it is very important when we are typing according to Socionics or according to psychosophy, it is very important to stay away from unique individual part, because we don't care about individual features that a person has, because we are searching for typical part of this person. We are searching for type, which is a part of certain typology. So it's very important to make and to take into account these differences. So what do we have later? Later we have functions and psyche model in psychosophy. We have different models in socionics and in psychosophy, and now we are going to talk about this. So what do we have? Okay, so we have different models in these typologies, and of course there are different directions in socionics that create their own models of socionic types, and we all know, for example, model A. It is named after the creator of socionics. And in psychosophy we have different model. It's a bit more simple, and it has other features, and now we shall talk about them. So we have 4 functions in psychosophy: emotion, physics, logic, and will. So every person has these 4 functions, but every person has its own order of these functions. Any person has 2 strong functions, some of these 4, and 2 weak functions, and has its own order according to their features. So what do we have here? It is the model. It is quite simple. You can look over there and see that we have high functions first and second. They are called strong functions or high functions. It is the same. It has the same meaning within psychosophia. And we have weak functions, third one and fourth, or low functions, according to their position. Stronger functions are situated higher, and weaker functions are here. And here we have energy and strength of a function, of any functions. So we have emotion, physics, logic, and will, and every person has its own order of these functions, and every function can be strong or weak. That is why we have the diversity of behavior and diversity of human realization and activity in our society, thanks to this typology and socionics. They are describing that quite well. That is why we're using socionics in psychosophy to help in professional orientation. So if a person has, for example, first logic, so it will be the strongest function. It is situated on the first position, and it has 50%. It is an approximate number, of course. We have 50% of all the psychic energy that we have. So it is the strongest function. The second one has 30%. It is still strong, but it is oriented mostly on a dialogue. So what do we have later? We have third function, which has only 15%. Third function is the most vulnerable, and it has to be developed during the lifetime. And the fourth function has only 5%. It's the function that we can easily neglect. It is not so important, and we have any problem with fourth function. It's just not perceived. It's just not perceived as something very important. The absolute quantity of problems, difficulties, doubts, and so on we have in third function. In English, it's not so complicated as in Russian. It depends on what sources do you read. We have 2 people from Kyrgyzstan. That's nice. So the model is quite simple. Of course, there is a short version of model given here because there are other significant features that functions have, but it will be too long to talk about them within our today's topic. So let us go further. Here's some information. Psychosophy was created by Russian researcher Afanasyev. That's why many types in psychosophy are named after famous Russian people. It is true, because just like in socionics, we have nicknames of those types as Don Quixote, Hugo, Robespierre, Maxim Gorky, and so on. The same situation is in psychosophy, but we have 24 names for 24 types. Later we will look at them. For example, such type as emotion, physics, will, and logic is called Pushkin, in honor of Russian poet Alexander Pushkin, who possibly had such psychotype. Okay, but it's interesting that Pushkin not necessarily had such type. He could easily have first physics and second emotion, but it's not so important. We have a name, we have a title of a psychotype within psychosophy. For example, my type is logic, physics, will, and emotion. It is named Plato after Greek philosopher. There are some philosophers that after what, I forgot how it is correct to say. So there are some names of philosophers in titles of psychotypes in psychosophy. For example, some more examples. Carl Jung, the creator of psychological types theory, had type physics, logics, will, and emotion, Aristippus, after a philosopher as well. And for example, our Russian president Vladimir Putin has type will, physics, emotion, and logic. It is called Twardowski, after our Russian writer. What do we have later? One important thing about psychosophy is that, for example, in Socionics we have 4 quadras, alpha, beta, gamma, and delta. While in psychosophy we have not 16 types, we have 24 of them. And psychosophy has 24 types, which are divided in 6 tetrades, which are named after their order, first, second, third, and etc. So here we have all the 24 types of psychosophy, and we have tetrades. They are united according to the order of their functions. For example, if we take first tetrade, this tetrade has first physics and first emotions. Only in this tetrade we have such a combination. 2 types with first physics and 2 types with first emotion, and they complement each other. Every tetrade has 2 pairs that complement each other according to 4 functions. There are intertype relations in psychosophy as well in socionics, and they are very important in everyday communication, in creating families, and so on. They are really important, and psychosophy is often used in different collective for HR and so on, because psychosophic priorities and psychosophic types have very practical implementation in everyday life. For example, we have second tetrade, and here we have 2 types with first logic and 2 types with first emotion, and they also make 2 pairs and two pairs that complement each other according to 4 functions. So what do we have later? What do we have? So the names of types, we have Aristippus, Goethe, Ghazali, Anderson, from different epochs, from different spheres, but there are many writers, philosophers, Plato, Lao Tzu, Pushkin, Pasternak, both Russian writers, Lenin, political leader, Napoleon as well, political leader, Bukharin, political activist from Soviet Union, Rousseau was a writer from France, Twardowski, Tolstoy, they were Russian writers, Berthier, he was a French soldier, a French military activist as far as I remember, Augustine, he was some religious activist, Socrates, Greek philosopher, Akhmatova, Russian poet, Borgia, as far as I remember, it was a medieval politician, Epicurus, I don't remember who was, maybe somebody remembers, Einstein, everybody knows, Pascal, philosopher, Dumas, writer from France, and Chekhov, Russian writer. So we have such nicknames of these types, but you can also use just the abbreviation. These 4 functions are showing what order of functions any person has. So it's very interesting to see the logic in these two traits and in their combinations. So there is a question: what difference between logic, will, emotion, physics? Logic, emotion, will, physics. In a way, how they show themselves. We're talking about psychosophic type when we look at a person from a side, and if we compare these both types, logic, emotion, will, and physics, it is a Pascal type. He will be much more emotional in his behavior. He has much more energy in emotional expression of himself, while logic, will, emotion, and physics, he will be much more reserved, calm, and even introverted in common sense of this word. So the second emotion is the most, those people that have second emotion are the most sociable, emotional, and so on. So that is the difference between them. That is the difference. So every person has one of these 24 types according to Psychosophia. It's quite interesting typology. I got acquainted with Psychosophia 10 years ago. Till that time I was already quite deep in Socionics. I knew everything about Socionics that was known at that time, and Psychosophia turned out to be a very useful and helpful addition to Socionics typing, Socionics studies. How to figure out the third insecure function? Is it possible not to have one? Unfortunately, it's not possible not to have third function. Every person has third function, and every person has its own vulnerable place, vulnerable function, whether it can be logic, physics, will, emotion, any of them. When we type, for example, a person, we have 4 blocks of questions, 4 divisions of questions, and person is answering the questions concerning physics, will, emotion, and logic. And in some, when we are analyzing his answers, we see necessary traits that are natural for every of 4 functions. And if we take third function, it is the most problematic, most difficult. It is the function that every person to some extent tries to hide. He tries to hide his vulnerability in this question. His answers become contradictory when he's talking about his third function. Some people are doing quite the opposite thing. They are not hiding their vulnerability, they're showing it as if they're trying to get some help on this third function. So there are different strategies how do people behave about their third functions, but all of them are quite typical. So the main 2 main strategies are whether a person is trying to hide his third function, or he's showing it and you become ashamed a bit about him when he is showing his third function, if it is not developed one. It depends on the level of development of personality as a whole. So every person has third vulnerable function. So what do we have in the chat? Okay, so let's talk a bit the functions themselves. Emotion, it is a brief description of emotion. You can have a bit more information under the video. There are links to our different pages of our website, and we have a special article on Socionics and Psychosophia, and you can read more details there. So emotion, it is about emotional component in behavior, emotional interaction with other people, energy on emotions in general. How much energy does a person have? The position of emotion is important for any profession related to art and for any area where emotional communication with people is needed. For example, if you are involved in the sphere of entertainment, public performance, emotion is absolutely necessary. For example, Michael Jackson and many famous musicians have had strong psychosophic emotion. Strong, if we're talking about strong emotion, we mean first one or second one. They are different in their expression, in their behavior, but both of them are strong. People with first emotion can be not very emotional in our ordinary sense from a side, but when they are performing on stage, for example, they sometimes do the most bright expressions they have. So only in specific circumstances we can see that first emotion is really emotional. In ordinary life, in everyday situation, first emotion is not necessarily some kind of bright person. Would you say that types that belong to the same trait share any similarities? I have seen trait descriptions. Would you say they are meaningful, or are they less relevant than in Socionics? I would say that they are less relevant than in Socionics, because you can have, for example, where do we have our traits? For example, let's take some kind of type. Let's take type Borgia, for example. This type has fourth wheel. It can be complemented with type with first wheel. We have two types with first wheel from the same trait, but as well we have people with first wheel from fourth trait. So it is much more important in psychosophy not only being from one trait, but it is also important when you have complementary function in everyday interaction. So it's not so important, and there are no some descriptions that can embrace all the four types from any trait, because every trait can be divided into two halves, which are very different. For example, let's take second trait. It's my trait. We take two types, Plato and Lao Tzu. So they both have first logic and last emotion. They can be quite similar in behavior. While if we take, for example, Pushkin and Pasternak, which are vice versa, they have high emotion, first position, and last logic. So they can be quite similar to each other as well. But it's two halves of one trait that behave quite different. So it's not so important to unite them into one trait. There are no values like we have in Socionics, so there are no values in Psychosophia. There is just an interaction between different functions. And for example, if we take, it is a question of intertype relations, it's far more beyond our today's topic, but it's very important to have complementation in, for example, close relations, according to Psychosophia. It's very important to have complementation to your third function. It's very unhealthy and very difficult situation for you can be if, for example, you have third function, for example, third wheel you have, like Pushkin has, or Plato, or Dumas, for example, third wheel, and your partner has first wheel. So these intertype relations are very, very inconvenient for you, not for the first wheel. So, something like that. Some more description of a type. It depends on what type are you asking about. So there are 24 of them. So, what do we have later? Physics. Physics, it is a material world. Everything that is connected with material world. Wealth, financial security, living conditions, the way a person looks, clothes, fashion, and so on. The position of physics largely determines domestic and sexual compatibility between people. It is right. It is important. The majority of people on Earth have high physics, just from the point of view of evolution. So evolutionary, it is necessary that majority of people should have high physics, first one or second one. So physics is quite down-to-earth function. It is very, very close to, and the majority of people have high physics. The majority of you maybe have high physics and your acquaintances. But there is a full diversity of all 24 types. They are not made, they cannot be met in equal proportions, but as well we can see all the 24. I'm sorry, I have lost my thought. So we have all the 24 types, but they cannot be met in equal proportion. The majority of people have high physics. The next function is will. Will is connected with ordinary and everyday understanding of strength of a character. Are you a strong-willed and purposeful person? Can you influence other people? Can you be a leader and be responsible? What is your leadership style? Do you have the strength to defend your positions and resist external factors? The position of will directly affects your leadership qualities. The people that have high will, first one or second one, they are leaders by their nature, and it is quite natural for them to become leaders, political leaders, managers, entrepreneurs of any kind. So it is also an inborn characteristic, and people who have low will, who have less energy on will, they cannot overcome and become more cool in will than those people that have from their birth. So people are not equal in this sense. Each of us has its own type and has its own difference in energy on different functions. The question, how do you tell the first and second function expressions in everyday situations? It means what functions are you asking, because all of them are very different. If we take, for example, emotion, second emotion and first emotion are very different in the expressions. In the expressions, I said about it before. If we take first and second physics, they are also quite different, but if we do not know a person closely, or if we haven't read his psychosophic questionnaire, so it can be quite difficult to tell apart first physics and second one. We only can see that he has high physics because he has high priority in material world, wealth, financial security, living conditions, and so on. My socionic type is LSI. So the next function is logic. It defines interest, amount of energy, and approach to the study of anything, and to bring something new in intellectual sphere. It is a very important moment. Strong psychosophic logic gives a person goals in intellectual and logical sphere, science and education of any kind. Many scientists and researchers have high, strong logic. For example, Sigmund Freud had second logic, and grandfather of Socionics, Carl Jung, had second logic. I have first logic, and I'm quite a long time been involved in Socionics and psychosophy and all this intellectual stuff. So that is very very different. All the people have very different priorities according to psychosophy. How the third function problems can reflect on the first function? It's a very interesting question, because if we take the model, where do we have model? The model of psychosophy, there are some more characteristics of these functions. For example, first function and third one, they are called dominating functions, and they are connected somehow. And there is a very interesting connection between them, because, for example, the first function is always strong, and the third one is always has a lack of energy. And sometimes it's a very common situation. We see that very often. If a person has problems with third function, he tries to cover this problematic with this problem with his first function. For example, there is such a type as Chekhov: physics, will, emotion, and logic. It's very common for such people to have some emotional problems, some unexpressed feelings which burn somewhere deep inside. And what do they do? How do they cover the problem of their third emotion? they are covering this problem with physics. For example, they start drinking alcohol just to cover this problematic with emotion. Or first physics can also express itself as some kind of violence, for example, fighting. And if a person is drunk already, so first physics can express itself like that: drinking, fighting, and eating too much, for example, some compulsive eating. It's also an excessive expression of first function, of first physics. So many people have such problems. They are just covering the problems that they have with third function. So first and third functions are connected in a very intricate way. And all these problematics can be reduced if we work with our third function. For example, for Chekhov, with his third emotion, it is necessary to study himself, to express emotions and do it in an adequate way, not to keep everything inside, not to let some emotions, not to have some emotions deep inside unexpressed. This person shall study to express in a good way. It can be, for example, some artistic activity, writing poems, musicians, making music, for example, or performance on stage. It can be very difficult for these people with third emotion, but it can help reduce all this problematic of third function. And every third function has its own strategy of healing, of improving, and of development. So what do we have? We have briefly talked about 4 functions: emotion, physics, will, and logic. And what do we have? That's a very important topic, the next one: functions in socionics and psychosophy, which are often confused with each other. Talking about the model, how would you define the difference between result and process functions? In general, they are very different. Result and process functions. Generally speaking, I would say that result functions are mostly concentrated on the finished huge result, and they are not very interested in, I forgot the word, I'm gonna look it up in the dictionary. So you asked a question and I lack some words to answer you. Okay. So processive functions are mostly concentrated on intermediate details, intermediate small pieces, while resultive functions, they are concentrated on the huge result without any details. For example, if we take will, resultive function, resultive will, prefers to take final decision as quick as possible and follow this decision, and not to change it, while processive wills are trying to be in contact with each other. The goals of processive wills can be changed during the way, and for example, they are not trying to make some final decision. Processive wills, they are always in process. They are going somewhere, and the goal can be changed during the way. It's very difficult to understand for resultive wills, which prefer to take one goal and go to this goal and do not change it during the way. And processive wills, they are in contact with each other, and they are trying to negotiate the decision. They are trying and they are keeping the decisions of all the people that are around them. They are trying to take this into account and to make some decision with element of any person that they consider important to them. While resultive wills, they are just taking decisions, and sometimes they do not even tell about that decisions, or they are telling about the final result that they concluded for themselves, and it is a fact. So I'm going, for example, to move to other country, first will is telling, and he just declares that and he goes to his own goal. while processive wills will talk first and will know the opinion of important people for them. So that is roughly speaking, the difference between processive and resultive functions. And the same situation with any other function: emotion, logic, physics. If there is a dialogue, there is a processive function. If there is a monologue and a result, it is a resultive function. It's very interesting. It's quite interesting when you have some observations over people of different psychosophic types. How do they behave in these spheres? So functions that often confused with each other. We have in psychosophy we have physics, and in socionics we have sensation or introverted sensation. It is the most common thing, according to my observations, to confuse these phenomena. Some people think that, for example, psychosophy is an alternative to socionics, and they making these phenomena equal in their understanding, but it's not correct, because if we take, for example, this situation when a person is confusing physics and sensation in socionics or introverted sensation, it is the most common thing. For example, many people have first physics, and I'll take a very rough example. Some people with first physics like to eat tasty, and it is a very important part of their life, for example. And people who are not acquainted with psychosophy, they are watching from a side to such person, and they are thinking that it is sensation or introverted sensation, or this is white sensation as a basic function. And it is not correct until we type this person in socionics and listen to semantics, because first physics can be not only at sensory types, also intuitive types can also have high physics and first physics, and also intuitive types can be very inclined to eating some tasty food and have this as a very important part of their life. So physics is not sensation. It's very important, and very strange situation can be when we meet, for example, a socionic sensory type with low physics. So from one side we have sensory type who has more concrete thinking, concrete perception of real world, and he has low physics. He has very little interest in wealth, in living conditions, and some down-to-earth wills, some down-to-earth willings, for example, comfort, luxury life, and so on. There was an example in our chat. For example, we typed Barack Obama, the previous president of the United States. So he has types. He's ethical sensory introvert, he's Dreiser, and his psychosophic type is logic, will, emotion, physics. So he's a sensory type with low physics. It can be strange for people who do not know this, both these typologies, but it is so. He's a sensory type with low physics. Can you explain how will, logic, emotion, physics covers weak emotion with his first will? It's quite easy. First will takes decisions, takes new goals for himself, and for example, if third emotion has some problems deep inside, some emotional problems or unexpressed feelings and so on, first will becomes more first. It becomes more strict, and such people can lead, can behave as dictators. For example, when it is a political leader or a leader of some group of people, he becomes very dictator-like. So the first will becomes more strict, more weird. Such people can push their will in a very rough way. They can I forgot the word. Yes, such people with first will, they can suppress the will of other people and do it in a very dictator way. So first will can become more monstrous. The second one, yes, we're just talking about will. Will is often confused with black sensation. Because we have an old stereotype in Socionics that all the 4 types with black sensation strong, from beta and from gamma, they should be strong-willed. It's not correct, because there is a different position of will, and these types which have strong black sensation can have different position of will. They can have strong will and weak will as well. So will is not equal to black sensation. And if we take, for example, a person which has very strong will, it's not necessary that this person has black sensation type. We have an example. For example, we have typed. There is an entrepreneur. He's very well known. Richard Branson. He's British entrepreneur. He has first will. His type, according to Psychosophia, is will, emotion, physics, and logic. And according to Socionics, he is intuitive, ethical extrovert. Huxley. So it is an intuitive type with very strong will. So, and there is no any contradiction in that. So what do we have? Differences between emotion, logic, physics, and will, and emotion, logic, will, and physics in everyday life. Will determines, I forgot the word. So how to say that? Will determines whether a person is dominant in its character or more compliant, more mild. So if we take both of these types, the one with third will be more conflictual, more conflicting other people, while the person with fourth will be much more mild in his behavior. He will not provoke such more conflicts as third will sometimes do. So the difference in behavior and in character is very determined by the position of will. If a person has first will or third will, such person is more conflictual in everyday behavior, more conflictual, more dominating, arguing all the time. For example, if you see something like that, it's very high possibility that such person has dominating will. So what do we have next? Emotion and black ethics. They are not equal as well. It is often mixed with each other. Any type, any socionic type can be emotional if he has high emotion, especially second one. So any kind of type, whether it is an introvert or an extrovert, logic, ethic, it's not important. Some people who do not know about psychosophy or do not know well socionics, they type every person which is emotional, they type this person as Hugo, ethical sensory extrovert, or Hamlet, ethical intuitive extrovert, but it's not correct. Ethical intuitive extrovert Hamlet and Hugo and any other ethical type is not necessarily emotional in everyday behavior. It all depends on the position of emotion. So we type according to Socionics only using the semantics and the information that a person gives. So these phenomena are not equal, and Socionic type and psychosophic type can be combined in any combination. So we can have, for example, ethical extroverted type with low emotion, and vice versa. We can have logical introverted type with high emotion, and there is no any contradiction in that. They can be very different in their behavior, but Socionic type does not determine behavior on such a level which psychosophy describes. What do we have next? Logic. We have logic both in psychosophy and Socionics, but different different meanings there are behind these terms. So logic, psychosophic logic, is often mixed with white logic in socionics. If you see, for example, a person which is involved in science, in research, in intellectual work, and brings something new in this intellectual work, there is high possibility that this person has high logic, psychosophic logic, and or at least his logic is not on the fourth position, because people with third logic are also can be found in some intellectual activities, like, for example, computing, programming, scientific research, and so on, mathematics, working with numbers, with data, and so on. So it's all these activities require logic higher than fourth position. And very often, I saw this many times, this activity is often mixed with white logic. It's not correct, because any type, and ethical types as well, can be found in programming, for example. It depends on the position of logic, psychosophic. It's not necessary. But if a person, for example, has strong socionic logic, white or black, it's not so important. And if this person has logic strong in psychosophia, so this gives him very, very huge advantage and a very huge resource in implementing yourself in such intellectual activities. So, for example, we typed many people from programming sphere. So we have many people that are involved in such intellectual work, and they are also interested in some intellectual schemes and psychological theories, and they often come across socionics and psychosophy. So they are interested in such structural information, and they often come to us, and we have typed many of them. And we saw logical types according to socionics and ethical types in programming very often. So there is no any contradiction, but all of them had at least strong or not fourth psychosophic logic, or strong socionic logic, or both. They could have strong logic in socionics and psychosophy. So such persons have the highest resource and the highest potential in implementing themselves in intellectual and research sphere, and programming as well. We even have a video, it's only in Russian so far, who is the best programmist, who is the best person who is involved in programming in computer sciences. So it's in most cases it is logic with high logic, psychosophic. So looks something like that. I would like to say that until the recent time we had a limitation. We have remote typing in socionics and psychosophy in English and in Polish language as well, because I understand quite well Polish language. And we type people from Poland and from abroad, from any country, and any person who can speak and tell your answers in English. You can identify your type in our Archetype Center in a remote way. So until recent time, we had a limitation in Psychosophia. It was a requirement to fill out our questionnaire in written form. So now there is no such limitation. You can record a video with answers to our questionnaire. You can download the questionnaire and look up the questions that we have in Psychosophic questionnaire, and to estimate if it will be interesting for you to have such typing. So you can answer the questions in video and in writing as well. If it is more convenient to you to answer our questions in writing, it's also okay. The main requirement for everyone who will be typing at Archetype Center is to reply the questions in several sentences at least. It will be the most good and reliable result if you have some sentences of answers to every question. You mentioned that first emotion people are less expressive and emotional than second emotion. Yes, that's right. Can you elaborate on the difference between the two How does process versus result apply to emotions? The absolute majority of people have processing emotion, and it is quite culturally, it is quite accepted on cultural level. Processing emotion is more acceptable and more good according to public moral restrictions. And the difference is that second emotion is trying to take into account the emotional atmosphere that already exists. It is called in psychosophy the second emotion has some kind of tuning to a certain people. For example, second emotion looks at the company of people in some informal situation. For example, second emotion looks at his friend and sees that his friend is, for example, some kind of sad. He has third emotion, or something is wrong with him, or he has some unexpressed inner emotions hidden somewhere deep inside. So second emotion prefers to tune on the atmosphere and to take it into account, and the second emotion tries to create this atmosphere, to rule this atmosphere, to change it, for example, in this or that way. But second emotion does it very, very thoroughly and very in an adequate way, while the first emotion does not adapt to any atmosphere that exists somewhere. First emotion is strongly on its own wave, and first emotion stays in its own emotional state, and it wouldn't like to change it just because the atmosphere is inappropriate or something like that. First emotion is it's some kind of first emotion sings, if it is a singer with first emotion. When such a person is going on stage, first emotion is singing for herself, not for the audience, but for herself. I can give you some example even. I can give you an example. There is such a band from Norway. It is called Camelot. They used to play power metal, and their previous vocalist, whose name is Roy Hahn, he is sensory ethical extrovert, and he has first emotion. You can watch their concert Long Winter Nights or something like that. It's 2006. So you can watch this concert and look how does first emotion behaves. And they have a very interesting and very funny duet with some girl who is the vocalist from other band. I have forgotten her name. He has such red hair. I have forgotten. So in this concert they have joint performance. They are singing one song, and Roy Hahn has first emotion, and his partner, that girl, she has second emotion. And it's very obvious the difference between them, because Roy Hahn, as a first emotion, he is singing only for himself, and he does not take into account what is happening out there. While this girl with second emotions, she is singing just for the audience. She is looking at the audience. She is in the dialogue with the audience. While Roy Hahn, he is completely with himself in his first emotion. That is the difference, and it is quite obvious when you compare the live performance. Now I will find this song for you and give you the link. It's a very nice song, by the way. Simona Simons, her name. Oh, here it is. Here it is. So you can see first emotion and second emotion in this clip. It is a live performance record, and you can compare how do they behave. how to help first emotion when it's sad and upset? That is the question. That is a very good question, because there's no need to help first emotion. You can even irritate first emotion if you will try to influence her emotional state. First function is the most strong in our psyche. So where is the model? Here we have our model. The first function is a monologue function. It does not need any help, any assistance, or something like that. If you would like to make first emotion angry, then try to support it, try to give some help. First function does not need any help. It is the strongest function. And it can be very irritating if you are trying to change something in first function of any other people. So there's no need to help first emotion. So I think that's all that I wanted to tell you today. We have also, I would like to tell you about some innovations that we have. So apart from the fact that we have no limitation on psychosophic typing anymore, you can record a video for psychosophic typing. There is a link under the video with our website page where you can read it more in details. So there's one more thing. You can order, for example, if you will be watching this video after, or if you will have some questions some questions on socionics and psychosophy, or something more, you can order a video that will be shot within 14 days and it will be published on our channel. I have no plans so far to make streams in English regularly, in a regular way. So if you would like to get a reply to your question and you would like to see a reply as a separate published video on our channel, not within a stream, so you can order such video. The information is under the video in the description. You can read the information over there. Also, we have people that apply to us for typing, for socionic typing and psychosophic typing from abroad, from various countries, not only America and Canada, United Kingdom. So we have recently, we have a person from Spain. So that's very interesting. Very interesting to type people from different countries and from countries that, and from people who do not speak Russian. It's very interesting to type people in English. But the fact is that all the functions in socionics and psychosophy are working the same. It's not important what language are you speaking. The functions are the same, and the features of functions are the same, and the values and the semantics is all the same. That's very interesting. So thank you. My English is not very brilliant because I haven't had any practice in English for 5 years, and these English streams are quite a challenge for me. But I'm trying to express my thoughts as good as I can. It's very important for me not only to make information in Russian, because I see the interest in socionics and psychosophy in the Western countries, and I'm very glad that I have that response from people who are writing to me and they are telling that they have much more understanding in socionics and psychosophy after watching our videos. So that's very good, because it's not very easy to understand all these typologies in English, because there's a very huge lack of information in English, both in socionics and psychosophy. So we have very huge experience, and we are ready to share this experience, and we are making regular streams in Russian on socionics and psychosophy. And this one is the second stream in English that I make with answers to your questions. And today I decided to make some psychosophic theory stream. I hope that you will get some more information, and you will know some differences that exist between socionics and psychosophy. So if you have some questions, I'm ready to answer them. But as for now, I have told you all the information that I planned to tell you today. So I'm going to close this one and make some larger image. Here it is. I see that there are some more people added to our stream. That's very good. So one more thing that I wanted to tell you. I had some question. That I planned to talk about. How does the fourth function behave in situation where it has to express itself, especially considering fourth logic? Oh, it's very common thing. We have little energy on our fourth function, and it's quite difficult for a person to work on its fourth function for a long time. So, for example, if we have fourth logic and such person has to make some scientific research or degree paper in university, so fourth logics have the most difficult times when they have to make such work, when they have to work with numbers, with texts, with scientific research, reading, analyzing, and so on. For fourth logic, it's always there are always some more interesting tasks and activities aside from studying. And fourth logics prefer to study, to get the education, and not to go back to that topics, because it's more convenient for fourth logic to work and to act in some more practical oriented spheres. For example, managing, creating something, some emotional activity, entertainment, production of something, making some services, but not in science, in research and intellectual work. There are special types with high logic that have great pleasure in that, but not the fourth logic. Fourth logic prefers to get the information in a most precise way, to get the final conclusion and to implement this conclusion in real practical issues. That's what fourth logic would like to hear and to get from other people. Fourth function is oriented to the most precise way of giving information. What's the difference between third and second emotion in everyday life? They are very different in the level of energy. They are very different in the strength. Second emotion is much more emotionally easy, much more expressive, much more sociable, and so on. Third emotion is much more reserved, calm, and cold, even in behavior. I would like to give you some examples. So. Third emotion. What are famous people that can be famous in Western countries with third emotion? Barack Obama is not very bright because he has third emotion, but he has very developed third emotion. We even thought that he might have second emotion, but it is only a third. So the difference is in the quantity of energy, I would say. Can the first logic be lazy to learn? It depends on the topic, because for the first logic there are topics that are very important, and in these topics first logic is very, very productive. But at the same time first logic is very unequal in its knowledge. For example, first logic can choose at school, mathematics is what I need and what I'm interested in, and for example biology, I will not learn it at all, something like that. So first logic can be lazy only in that topics that this logic considers uninteresting or unnecessary. How second physics use its power to upgrade its life? It's everyday work. It's making something in household, some household repair, running and leading the household duties and so on. Second physics is constantly working in material world, and it finds it interesting and finds great pleasure in interacting with material world. For example, in my room, I have collected and I have constructed almost all the furniture that I have here. Aside from this chair, I have constructed this table from other table, completely reworked it. I have here a great shelf and there, so I have constructed it by myself, something like that. How do fourth emotion and feeling extroverted dominance exist? How might that look like? It looks like a very calm and to some extent emotionless person from a side, but at the same time these persons have strong ethics and they have huge amount of black ethical semantics in their speech. So it can be quite unusual to a person who prefers classic socionics and who thinks that every ethical intuitive extrovert is obliged to be very emotional. It's not necessarily like that. Oh, for example, but it's not a very good example. But at the same time, for example, there is a very, very famous psychologist from Canada, Jordan Peterson. He is an ethical intuitive extrovert with first emotion. So it is a very good example, for example, to look at Hamlet with first emotion. He's not very emotional in his daily expressions. Fitulka, yes, that's right. Fitulka is the best. Fitulka helps to run our streams every day. So questions. It's not necessary that ethical sensory extrovert and ethical intuitive extrovert will be dominant in emotions. It depends on the position of emotions, in psychosophy. So how second physics, how fourth physics look like Barack Obama, for example. They're just looking like ordinary people, and at the same time they have no any interest and deep priority in material world. We can know that only from their speech and from their position according to physics. From a side, it's nothing special about this. So we cannot determine fourth physics just by looking at some person from a side. Oh, just like I told Jordan Peterson, I will write that in our chat. So Jordan Peterson. He is ethical intuitive extrovert and his type is emotion, will, logic and physics. He has fourth physics. He looks like intelligent professor, teacher, psychologist, and there's nothing wrong about fourth physics. It's not necessary that fourth physics should look like some kind of homeless person. There are such memes in psychosophy. Fourth function is just a function that has no interest, has no energy, has no priority, has no any specific goals. So what do we have? Jordan Peterson. What about sport and fourth physics? It's not very interesting for fourth physics to go in for sports as a professional or to take some great pleasure in sport activity. Fourth function can do some sports only because for good feeling, and if someone teached that fourth physics to do some sports. In all the other cases, if we are taking, for example, some random person who goes in for sports, in most cases it will be high physics. So if we take a person that goes in for sports and has a great pleasure in this activity, it's most likely that it is high physics. The vision of world, their behavior. The vision of world is concentrated in non-material spheres. If we're talking about fourth physics, for any type which has fourth physics, it is important to make some activity in intellectual, emotional sphere, or in the sphere of organization, interaction, and influence on other people, not in material world. So Jordan Peterson is quite a bright example of that, I think. He is making his main activity in intellectual and emotional and will sphere. He's not trying to build houses, to produce some products, so there's no physics in his activity. Who is more lazy, fourth or first physics? Some first physics tend to be very lazy. Fourth physics is not necessarily lazy. First physics, that's right. So the most lazy people, in most cases, they have first physics, which has some problems with their third functions as well, in most cases. They tend to procrastinate, to eat too much, to make some excessive passive way of life, something like that. Staying at home, watching series, watching cartoons or something like that, and doing nothing. It is the first physics that has some problems with motivation or problems with third function. If process emotions is more tuned to the environment than result emotions, would you say that a second emotion type would be better at influencing other people than a type with first emotion and second will? It depends on the situation. Sometimes first emotions are so bright and they shine so brightly on the stage, like Michael Jackson, for example, that they influence on other people in a very, very huge way, but their influence can be compared with a blast of a great nuclear bomb, something like that. Influence of first function is very rude to some extent. It's a very dominating influence, while the second emotion is making its influence in a more delicate way, more taking into account the environment, more sharp tuning, something like that. So they have different way of influence. But which influence will be, it depends on the situation and on the concrete person. The second emotion can be very influential if it is connected with first will. There are many people in artistic activity, music, and in politics as well, because it is also about will. For example, Adolf Hitler had type will, emotion, physics, and logic. So he had very huge influence. And of course, his socionic type also played its very significant role in that. I used to think that I have fourth physics, but now I think I have first physics. It's just more possible. According to our statistics, the chances are very high that the majority of people have high physics. And I'm really lazy. Yes. It's a very, very, very significant feature of first function, of first physics, to be lazy. Very, very significant tendency. What does first logic need to change its mind about some science object by itself? First logic can change its mind only by herself. It's very difficult to over-persuade first logic. There shall be some circumstances in which first logic cannot anymore ignore some new facts, new concepts, and so on. But the process of changing mind is very painful for first logic, and it happens only within this first logic. Only a person with first logic by itself will change its mind. Other people have very little influence on this process. Why would first will be better at influence if it doesn't take other people into account? It depends on the adequacy of concrete person. It does not mean that every first will person will be inadequate, super crazy. There are many people with first will which are very adequate, very intelligent, but they are very strict in achieving their goals. It seems like Steve Jobs had first will. He was a very strict manager, but he reached his goals, and they can be very strict and harsh in close communication when they are managing their team, their colleagues, and so on. So that's a very important thing. My girlfriend, probably first physics, she is opposite, enormously active. That's very good, because it's more natural and more healthy to be active in comparison with some passive way of life. There are two regimes, two modes of first physics existence. In one mode, first physics is lazy and it's very procrastinating. And other mode, first physics is very hard working, and it's very hard for first physics to just to make some pause, to make a stop in its work, because first physics, if it starts working on something, it needs to finish the work, to get the result, to touch this result, to have some material result of its work. So it's sometimes very difficult for first physics to stop when it's working. But it is okay. It's better for first physics to be motivated in hard working rather than sitting at home and doing nothing. So I think that will be the end. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your attention. And I hope that we will see you again, and I will make some other streams in English. I haven't constructed any topic so far, so I hope that that was useful for you and helpful in understanding Socionics and Psychosophy. And thank you very much, and see you later. Bye bye.